Hello, my name is Guillermo Alfaro. I am originally from El Salvador, and I'm currently a candidate at the University of Notre Dame's Masters of Science in Historic Preservation.
Hello, my name is Anton Petrukhin. I'm currently pursuing Master of Arts in World Heritage Studies in Brandenburg University of Technology in Germany in Cottbus. And yeah, originally I'm from Belarus.
Okay, so Anton and I worked together during the summer. Our summer internship was called Cultural Heritage Risk and Resiliency Documentation, and it was coordinated through World Heritage USA with the National Center for Preservation Technology and Training, known as NCPTT. And it was hosted by the Universidad Politécnica de Puerto Rico, the Polytechnic University of Puerto Rico, and the Puerto Rico State Historic Preservation Office. So our internship was an on-site 8-week project in Puerto Rico that consisted in two parts, a 3-week training program, followed by 5 weeks of working with the Puerto Rico State Historic Preservation Office, which I'll call PR-SHPO from now on, just because it's a little bit simpler to get through. Our principal objective for the 3-week course was to train and learn how to become digital documentation specialists of the built environment. And the 5-week internship following this course was with the Puerto Rico SHPO, like I said, where we put into practice the learned documentation strategies so that we would be able to complement the preservation office's developing digital collection of its local heritage infrastructure with data that will help plan and implement mitigation strategies that counter the adverse effects of climate change on the built heritage of the island. Particularly, our focus was in the city of Cataño, um, which is on the other side of San Juan, across the bay. So Cataño is the smallest town in Puerto Rico. It's located on the northern coast in the region of coastal plains and low flatlands that faces San Juan Bay, across from Old San Juan. It was originally a neighborhood of the municipality of Bayamon, which is located on the south here. But in 1927, it was officially named a municipality. It is known as the town that refused to die, and its name, Cataño, comes from Hernando de Cataño, the 16th century Spanish doctor who owned the land on which the neighborhood was developed. And so ever since then, there has been a settlement there, and it just kept expanding and growing. The principal economy is refinery, commerce, and the manufacturing and distribution of rum, which are the predominant industries in the town. And just as a fun fact, the Bacardi distillery is about 2.5 miles from the town center. And that one is actually part of it's a landmark recognized and protected. So like other coastal towns, and the reason why Cataño was selected for this study, uh, like other coastal towns in Puerto Rico, Cataño was severely affected by Hurricane Maria in 2017. About 80% of the dwellings were affected by flooding, and 650 of those buildings were destroyed. 66 years later, flooding is still common in some areas of the town center, such as the dwellings on Calle Amparo, which Anton and I documented. You can see that the street ends over here close to this lagoon. And while we were there, most of the neighbors complained that even if it wasn't raining, water would still get into their homes, just because it's one of the issues that they're having with the flooding, and it's primarily due to climate change, not necessarily just because of storms or hurricanes. You can see on the left side some of the effects that Hurricane Maria had. This is in Cataño, so you can see people in canoes, ships drowned, houses just underwater. So it's really important that we documented this to try to find a solution for them. Um, so Like I mentioned previously, as sea levels rise and flooding frequencies increase due to climate change, Puerto Rico's built heritage, particularly in the coastal area, is at risk of being lost. Therefore, it is imperative to determine structures at risk and propose mitigation strategies that protect these from further damage, ruin, and loss. The Heritage Risk and Resiliency Documentation Program and internship aims to do so by teaching and implementing surveying, documentation, and mapping techniques, working on Cataño with PR SHPO as a pilot project. So this was our schedule. I'm not going to go into it because there is a lot, but basically the important thing to take is, like I said, the course was divided into 3 modules, 1 module per week. We had several professionals from different places. The first week was led by Brent Fortenberry from Tulane University. The second was by Evelyn Villalobos, who was a professor at the Polytechnic in Puerto Rico and also works as a historic property expert in the PR SHPO. And the last week was led by Daniel Watts, who is a former IEP alum and a data and GIS specialist. And just to mention, besides Anton and I, there were other participants, including professionals from Puerto Rico and the United States that were involved in various fields like architecture preservation, cultural heritage, and archaeology. And the following 5 weeks involved the documentation and analysis work that built on and complemented the 3 weeks. So even if we were taking the course or we took a course, the course was not independent from the internship. It actually helped us, gave us a good starting point to proceed in working with the SHPO. So the first week consisted of an introductory presentation on the history and heritage conservation of Puerto Rico and lectures on laser scanning and photogrammetry data collection. We visited the municipality of Cataño several times where we put into practice the digital data collection learned in class, which, as I mentioned previously, included photogrammetry photography and terrestrial laser scanning with a Leica RTC 360 scanner. Participants, including us, also worked with ArcGIS Survey 123 to collect additional complementary data for the buildings photographed during our photogrammetric study. The images here show the collected data with the laser scanner. The really cool thing about the scanner is it's able to collect photographs as well as point data. So you can basically use this information not just to build 3D models, but also to kind of get an idea of what it would be like to be in that place, since it captures 360 degrees around every point and it feels like you're there. With this information, we also were, like I said, able to visualize street views and eventually generate orthographic images that can be used to develop architectural plans and drawings, as well as determine mapping for mitigation strategies. The second week, we focused on understanding historic building technology and traditional documentation techniques of conditions in architectural conservation and a little bit on civil engineering. We learned about the traditional building materials in Puerto Rico, which included lime mortars, brick masonry, and timber. And we surveyed the remains of the first Lutheran church of Puerto Rico in Cataño, which you can see on the left side. We produced hand-drawn plans and elevations that indicated the ruined structure's various building pathologies. The building assessment drawings were done on-site in groups by all the participants. And you can see the building was heavily damaged by Hurricane Maria. It actually destroyed the roof that it had. So since 2007, the amount of decay left it to such a point where most of the structure was completely destroyed or became a hazard. So this was just an example of the consequences that neglect and climate change can have on the built heritage, particularly in areas known to be at risk. Additionally, we also took part in a traditional mortars workshop where we prepared different mortar mixes and tested the resistance at the Polytechnic's Engineering Materials Lab. We all did a different type of mortar mix just to get a sense of what was traditionally done, how it was traditionally done, although at a smaller scale, and just to see the compressive strength that it has. Part of this is also so that we would understand that if you're working with traditional buildings, if you're going to do some sort of work on them in preservation or restoration, the best thing you can do is use the traditional methods and techniques, as well as the materials, to ensure that the building is not further damaged. And finally, during our third week, we focused on geographic information systems, or GIS, and their application in the identification, visualization, and ranking of risks to cultural heritage resources. This is where we actually started jumping in to the aspect of determining what was at risk, and try to come up with a system that showed which was at most risk, which was at least risk, and just from them try to see if there was a plan for mitigation to be developed. We use Catania, like I mentioned, as a case study, working with ArcGIS Pro, and with the survey data we got using Survey 123. And we also used FEMA's flood insurance rate maps, sea level rise data, and hurricane storm surge data to identify and rank structures at risk due to climate change. We also were introduced to the National Park Service's guidelines on the flood adaptation for rehabilitation historic buildings, which was using an exercise to recommend adaptation methods to surveyed buildings in Catania.
So from week 4 to 8, we worked in the State Historic Preservation Office. The building itself has a very interesting history. It was built in the mid-19th century and served as military barracks, first for the Spanish and then for the Puerto Rican regiments. After the Spanish-American War, the barracks were taken over and used by the US Army until 1939. The large courtyard building was abandoned after serving as a hospital during World War II. In 1976, the United States gave it back to the government of Puerto Rico. Besides State Historic Preservation Office, the building also houses the Museo de las Americas on the second floor. The building is an excellent example of adaptive reuse and integrated sustainable elements such as green roof and solar panels. The Puerto Rican State Historic Preservation Office plans to survey the historic centers of 78 municipalities in Puerto Rico. On the screen, you see the example of a survey for building Catania, where we worked. The surveys include information on the property's location, use, massing style and condition, and so on and so on, as well as if the structure is contributing to the overall character of its environment, and if it's eligible for nomination to the National Register of Historic Properties. At the start of the internship, State Historic Preservation Office received 138 of more than 1,000 properties surveyed for Catania. We revised some of these initial surveys, identifying incomplete information or information with errors, and informing the office historic property specialist so that she could contact the surveyors and request corrections or missing information. This information was later used by us for further research, and it was uploaded into ArcGIS Pro to assist with the creation of several maps that collected and documented useful information for State Historic Preservation Office. Using information collected from the 3-week course and digital documentation gathered during the summers of 2022 and 2023, the following series of maps of the historic center of Catania were created to identify structures at risk of being damaged or lost due to flooding and storms. The first map that you see represents the classification and visualization of risk based on firm flood zone location. FIRM stands for Flood Insurance Rate Maps, And these maps are the Federal Emergency Management Agency, FEMA, and the federal government's official set of maps that delineate flood zones and their risk at a hyper-local scale. Each flood zone describes a land area in terms of its risk of flooding. Forms are created to show areas where holders of federally backed mortgages must purchase flood insurance through the National Flood Insurance Program. Firms also play a part in determining local building code requirements. So the second map represents the classification and visualization of risk based on sea level rise, or SLR data. SLR data created by the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration Office for Coastal Management and developed to provide a preliminary look at the potential impacts of sea level rise, ranging from 0 to 10 feet above mean high water. The third map represents the classification and visualization of risk based on sea, lake, and overland surges from hurricanes, or in other words, SLOSH data. The SLOSH data set is the output of a computerized numerical model developed by the National Weather Service to estimate storm surge heights resulting from historical, hypothetical, or predicted hurricanes, by taking into account atmospheric pressure, size, forward speed, and track data. The SLOSH model consists of a set of physics equations which are applied to a specific local shoreline in comparing the unique bay and river configurations, water depths, bridges, roads, and other physical features. So the aggregated risk map based on form, SLOSH, and SLR data identified 95 properties at high risk and 612 at moderate risk of being affected by storms and floods. This accounts for 47% of the built heritage within the urban center of Catania. This percentage may be much higher. Based on observation during our visits to Catania and the data that we collected in building surveys, numerous structures rated as having low risk are unoccupied, neglected, and in various states of disrepair. To preserve Catania's character, mitigation strategies and maintenance plans must be implemented to protect and repair the most vulnerable buildings before they are lost forever. Once State Historic Preservation Office received the remaining property surveys for Catania, we recommend they create a new map on ArcGIS Pro that combines data from the aggregated risk map, the integrity and conditions map, and the buildings eligible for nomination to National Register for Historic Properties. This map will establish an overall ranking system that will help determine structures that require immediate interventions and help State Historic Preservation Office propose plans for mitigation and conservation of the most vulnerable structures, thus protecting and safeguarding Catania's urban center. Since only about 10% of the properties surveyed in Catania were received during the internship, a how-to guide was created by us to help State Historic Preservation Office complete maps, so they include the entire historic center of Catania once the remaining surveys are turned in. The how-to guide also explains how to start new projects, so the State Historic Preservation Office can start mapping other municipalities in Puerto Rico. So that was the work that we did during 8 wonderful weeks that we spent in Puerto Rico, in San Juan. We want to thank very much the World Heritage USA for choosing us, and of course the State Historic Preservation Office and National Center for Preservation Technology and Training for hosting and guiding us. It was a memorable and useful experience for both me and Guillermo. Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.